the evening news from Monday the 9th, 1854, included the following speculation. Quote, "Doubtless the Yankee Blade was heavily insured, and steamboating business on the Pacific has not been of late so lucrative as in times past, and with little future prospects of its ever becoming what it has been. It therefore suggests itself to us that this running of steamers on rocks, far away from their due and proper course, is a ready means of turning ships into money, regardless of the loss of human life."
Hello, and welcome to the Shipwreck Archive.
Thank you. Would you happen to have the story, The Deadly Race of the Yankee Blade?
Here we are. Enjoy!
The Yankee Blade was a 1,000-ton side-wheel steamship built in Long Island in 1853 and purchased by Cornelius Vanderbilt for his independent line. This meant that the Yankee Blade had to make the voyage round the Horn, something that she did under the command of Captain Randall, who had also designed her and directed her construction. Though Captain Randall was from New York, he would remain with the Yankee Blade, with his ship. The Yankee Blade arrived in San Francisco in May of 1854. She was to be put on the route between California and Panama, allowing passengers to connect to ships on Atlantic routes on the other side. It was an important route, and the Yankee Blade was described as a first-class ship, proving her speed almost immediately on her arrival. Being on an important route, however, meant that there was also a strong sense of competition between the captains of ships who made the voyage. It was reported that on September 29, 1854, the Yankee Blade and the Sonora were both preparing to depart at the same time for a voyage to Panama, which made a perfect situation for a race between the two ships of competing shipping lines. Indeed, it was further rumored that there was a $5,000 bet made about which ship would arrive in Panama the fastest. While this was a matter that sparked public interest, it also alarmed the Pacific Mail Company, which owned the Sonora. They issued a statement that Captain Whiting of the Sonora had been given orders not to engage in any racing or carry more than the regular amount of steam, since it could endanger his passengers. As insurance of this order being followed, the company decided to give the Sonora only 9 days' worth of coal for her outbound voyage, so that she would have to stop for coal in Acapulco. Captain Randall of the Yankee Blade did not seem interested in giving up the race, though. As the ships departed from San Francisco around 4 in the afternoon on the 30th of September, the Yankee Blade slowed down to allow the Sonora to catch up to her, and then raised her flag in challenge, and sped ahead. Departing at the same time as the two ships was the Goliath, also of the independent line. The Goliath was not part of the race, however. She was bound for San Diego, not Panama. While the California gold rush was slowing down, there was still plenty of demand from people who were going back and forth from the East Coast to the West Coast. Both the Sonora and the Yankee Blade had a large number of passengers on board. The Yankee Blade was carrying 819 passengers, as well as a crew of 120, under the command of Captain Randall. On board was also a consignment of gold from the California goldfields, estimated at the time to be valued at $153,000. The gold carried on the Sonora was an even larger amount, valued at $1,249,700, which might have been a factor in how quickly the Pacific Mail Company assured the public that there would be nothing as dangerous as racing occurring. Whether the race was one-sided and only in Captain Randall's head or not, when the Yankee Blade entered the fog soon after departing from San Francisco, the Yankee Blade did not slow down or take any soundings. He was under the impression that he was further out to sea than he actually was. A current was slowly carrying the ship closer and closer to land, while his ship continued on in the dense fog at full speed. It was later said that the passengers on the ship had voiced their alarm at these conditions, and the captain's apparent lack of regard for them, but that they were ignored. Well behind them, the Goliath had slowed down and was making her way cautiously through the fog. The passengers' concerns were validated when, about 3:30 in the afternoon, on October 1st, the ship ran full speed onto a rocky reef off Point Conception. Captain Randall had believed them to still be about 10 miles offshore, but they were only 3/4 of a mile from land. Mr. Hart, one of the passengers, reported that at the time the ship struck he was having a drink with Captain Randall, who was boasting about the speed at which his vessel was traveling. Due to her speed, she was driven with about half of her length up on the rock, with her stern still in the water. In the space of 25 minutes, the stern sank below the promenade deck, but with the ship's bow embedded on the rocks, the ship did not seem in any danger of immediately sinking any further. The panic on the ship upon impact was immediate. The land was less than a mile away. In the fog, no one on the ship was aware of it, and it seemed as though it would be difficult to escape the ship, whose settling stern had done nothing to calm the passengers. The officers did not do much to calm the panic, especially Captain Randall. As the passenger Mr. Hart put it, quote, "As soon as the ship struck, Captain Randall left, as he said, to find land. He found it, and found it convenient to stay on it. It does not seem, however, that Captain Randall left as quickly as Mr. Hart believed that he had. Mr. Hart was on a fruitless quest to acquire a life preserver immediately after the wreck occurred. It turned out that there were only enough for 1 out of every 10 passengers, so it is possible that he missed the initial efforts of the officers and crew. Almost as soon as the ship had struck, and it was seen that water was flooding into the holds, the engineer acted quickly and let off the steam in the boilers, as well as dampening the fires to ensure there would be no explosion. Meanwhile, the purser and the storekeeper went below with some of the crew and brought as many provisions and cargo as they could to the deck. When they reached the gold, the purser discovered that it was already under 5 feet of water, and so he simply locked the vault for safekeeping so that others could come back for it later. The Yankee Blade only had 4 boats, and the women and children were gathered around them on the deck while they were being prepared. The first boat that was launched was swamped almost immediately. Some people claimed it was due to people frantically jumping overboard and clinging to it, though that was not claimed in any official account. Many people in the first boat were lost. Others were dragged back aboard by ropes. A few reached the shore. The first mate took charge of the next boat with a load of 17 people, mostly women. His boat got close to land before it was also upset, and they were thrown into the water. Only the first mate and 3 other people were able to safely reach shore. Captain Randall must have been feeling anxious after losing 2 of the 4 boats that he had at his disposal, and he made the very controversial decision to take one of the boats and go himself to find a good landing spot that they could ferry the passengers to. Captain Randall would say that he had wanted to return to the ship, but that the members of the crew had rebelled against him when he asked them to get back in the boat. When he did not turn, the second mate took the final remaining boat with a load of passengers and also made a landing safely, but did not return due to having been swept by the current about 15 miles from the wreck. Once on shore, a makeshift camp was erected with a fire in order to warm the people who had come ashore wet. A passenger named Mrs. Jane Elwell was particularly given credit for going back into the water until she reached the boats that were in distress several times, and carrying women who were in distress ashore. The passengers and crew who remained on the Yankee Blade were now left with no boats, and the only officer who remained was the third mate, who was described by Mr. Hart as an older Scottish gentleman. No one would later have anything to say badly about the third mate, who seems to have done his best in a difficult situation to calm everyone down and reassure them that they would be fine. Things on the ship quickly got worse in spite of his efforts. The purser was forced through the night to stand guard with several other men over what he had been able to bring up to the deck as armed men roamed the deck, taking what they could. This was fueled by an initial pillaging of the ship's bar, and none of the men who had taken part could have been called sober. This mob seems to have included both passengers and members of the crew, and it was generally agreed that the steerage section of the ship quickly became a lawless zone, with shouts and cries for help. At least one man reported a nasty gash on the side of his head the next morning because he had initially declined to give a robber his watch. Among the passengers, there were rumors that one man who had not gone along with the demands of the thieves had been done away with, though this later proved to only be a rumor. It was a long and stressful night for those on the ship, as well as those on the shore, and no one seemed to have gotten much sleep. Rumors began among the besieged passengers who were faced with the danger of being robbed at any moment that among the people on the ship when it left San Francisco were people who had planned the entire wreck in order to commit robbery, and that the compass had been sabotaged. Again, no proof was ever offered of this, but it does go to show the mood of those on board through the night. Captain Randall certainly did not have a restful night either. He reported that he had spent the night watching over the two boats that they had managed to have reached the shore, so that they would not be destroyed by the waves before they could return the next morning for more people. At dawn the next morning, the boats were launched from the shore, and the work was resumed to bring people from the wreck of the Yankee Blade to the shore. It was not quick work. The two boats could only carry a little over 20 people each, and there had been over 1,000 people on board the Yankee Blade. It was therefore to the relief of everyone when the Goliath, under the command of Captain Haley, appeared on the horizon. Though they had left San Francisco at the same time, due to Captain Haley's significantly more cautious approach towards the fog, they had made a much slower voyage. On discovering the wreck of the Yankee Blade, Captain Haley acted quickly. It was not possible to bring over everyone from the Yankee Blade to the Goliath. The Goliath was carrying too much freight to make such a thing safe, but he did send his boats over to bring 600 of the people from the wreck of the Yankee Blade aboard his ship. The remaining 536 people were left safely on shore before the Goliath continued her journey. This proved for the best since, that night, the Yankee Blade was destroyed by the waves. And it was agreed that many more lives would have been lost if it had not been for the Goliath's timely arrival. Captain Haley ensured that the provisions from the deck of the Yankee Blade were also taken on shore before leaving, so that the camp of survivors would be comfortable. And he gave Captain Randall a dozen revolvers to help restore order. This last part was only partially effective. Some of the crew made an attempt to reach the gold on board the Yankee Blade, but were thwarted by it being underwater. Other members of the crew and passengers took possession of the supplies that had been landed and began extorting money out of the others for food. The people on the shore had a miserable time until the Goliath returned to pick them up on the 8th. There was, initially, a good deal of speculation about just how many people had been lost in the wreck of the Yankee Blade, with the estimated numbers in the papers reaching the hundreds. But when a full count was made, the final estimate was around 30. On their return to San Francisco, at least some of the men who had been seen engaging in robbery were arrested and put on trial, to the relief of the passengers who had been their victims. Unlike the thieves, Captain Randall's actions did not end in legal trouble, but the public was divided in their opinions of a captain who had left behind his ship full of passengers, no matter what his intentions were. The reckless sailing of his ship at full speed in foggy conditions was condemned by all. Captain Randall was not done with the Yankee Blade, however. He would return to the wreck of the Yankee Blade with the ship, the Ada, and begin salvage operations. In the space of 2 voyages to the wreck with divers, he was able to recover 6 boxes of bullion, but not all of it was turned over to the owners. The 3 divers were charged with theft by the owners, but it would never reach trial since 2 of the divers promptly disappeared. It seemed that no matter what Captain Randall did in regards to the Yankee Blade, he was doomed to face controversy. In the end, he returned to New York, where he began to attempt to organize a new steamship line, using his design for a 4-paddle wheel steamship, but he passed away at the age of 72 before his plans could reach fruition. For more information, please see Shipwrecks, Smugglers, and Maritime Mysteries by Eugene Wheeler and Robert Coleman, or see our other sources in the description below. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for visiting the Shipwreck Archives. See you soon.